This one, I didn't see coming. You probably didn't see this coming, but I can help make the argument along the way. Of all of the hot takes on Arch Manning, and the hot takes are nonstop, there's not a whole lot of data to go on with the hot takes, but it's not going to stop people from the hot takes. But how about this? This one, I don't think is bad. I don't. I think the off-field comparison is better, far better than the on-field comparison, but here you go. Tim Tebow. It's not my idea. It's someone else. Tim Tebow. I would introduce the next one that's going to make you flip out, and that's Caitlin Clark. But give me time. Follow along. Feel free to agree or disagree. It is comparing Tim Tebow, and I can explain for those that can't really remember much of Tim Tebow's career. I can explain the comparison. I can explain the Tebow career. There's off on the field and there's off the field. But his time at Florida was some of the most dominating college football play by a player in a team in the last 50 years. But this gives you an idea of maybe what people, particularly people in the South, that are going to talk about college football nonstop all year round. But he's going to be a huge topic all over the country, but he's going to be a even bigger topic, Arch Manning, in the South. This is Jake Pickell, Pickell, on the On 3 podcast.
Made an interesting comparison of the hype of Tim Tebow to what Arch Manning is dealing with right now. And one of you hit me with a take in your take of your college football take that is the hill you're dying on, rather, is that you think that Arch Manning is going to be as good as advertised. Spoiler, if Arch Manning is as good as advertised, he is Tim Tebow. Like, the comparisons, too, are pretty obvious. Both number one player in their class, both short yardage packages early in their career, both ridiculous hype before even getting the job. The thing with Tebow mania is even when he was getting reps at Florida and he had the goal line package and stuff like that, he did that while Florida won a national title. Like, the expectation for Arch Manning, and why I think the Arch Manning hype actually will be even greater than Tim Tebow's hype in his era that was what it was in college football, is because Texas is at this point where right on the doorstep, man. Hey, for those of y'all on podcast, they're knocking on the door. They're right there. Made the semis the last 2 years. And the question and the thought for Texas fans is, okay, if Arch Manning is who we think he is, with this roster, with Steve Sarkisian, we should win a national championship. And I'd love to sit here and tell you I think you're crazy and that shouldn't be an expectation. We don't know what Archer's going to be. But as we sit here right now, as we just kind of mentioned with that logic, like, that checks out to me. Now, I'm not saying that I would predict that. I wouldn't say that I would co-sign that. But I don't think that you're on this lunatic fringe if that's how you're viewing Arch Manning's, career at Texas. Now, I would also say that we need to be careful of wandering too far down the hype train tracks.
All right,
because
I'll
promise.
Stop there. The Tebow on the field, it's absurd. Okay, look, I've learned already, there is no logic, there is no pumping the brakes, there is no reality. You're going down that road. What do you say, the hype train? You're on that train is like a bullet train. So I can't even talk sense into you. But I do think it is interesting, the comparison to Tebow, which is fascinating on a number of levels. I don't think he wanted to touch on it, but I will. I have no problem doing that. So first of all, Tim Tebow as a player was, I think, one of the five. Yeah, I'll make the argument. And I guess we have to come up with who are the other four then. But one of the five most dominating players in college football of the past 40 or 50 years. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that he was Dan Marino. He was never a classic quarterback, but he was that good. He was that dominant in so many different ways on a Florida team, or teams really, that were that good. It was, his style of play was completely different. I'm not talking yet about the off-field stuff. So Yeah, that's one of the 5 most dominating players. So I have no idea how you could even entertain the idea that Arch Manning, with 2 games, 2 starts under his belt against Louisiana, Monroe, and Mississippi State, you can even begin to have the hype comparison other than it's there. It's just there. Now, Tim Tebow's was different for a number of reasons, which I'll talk about, which will offend many of you. But yeah, it's not crazy. But Tebow as a player, I don't know that in a year from now or 2 years from now that I would be sitting here or anywhere and be able to reasonably make the argument that the quarterback at Texas named Arch Manning is one of the 5 best, most dominating players of the past 50 years. I find that hard to believe. The Tebow time period was a different level of domination. You know, Vince Young had one of the most dominating seasons of any player at that position. But Tebow did it over time. That's one of the best careers of a quarterback in college football. Forget the NFL. It's a completely different animal. But one of the most dominating seasons as a quarterback, I don't feel crazy saying, of the past 40 to 50 years. And I think it's one of the most dominating at any position of the past 40 or 50 years. He would dominate games in every single way. And they were that good. So to compare the two of them is just absurd on the field. It is. The hype is there. So the setup isn't all that crazy. Super hyped player coming in. But Tim Tebow even coming in, and I don't even know what it was like then, even Tim Tebow hyped as a player can't compare to the hype of Arch Manning because you can't compare any player to that of today because of social media. But as an on-field product, you can't you can't go there. You have no idea. You don't know. And it's just a completely different world. Remember, those were teams coached by Urban Meyer, too. Texas isn't there by any stretch, and Arch Manning isn't there in any way, shape, or form, and there's no way you can say that. Now, if it all works out, then there you go. The off-field hype is the part that I think is most interesting, which was fascinating and polarizing with Tebow. And I think it's actually pretty close. I kind of like it. The hype of Tim Tebow off the field was off the charts. And a lot of it, now please hear what I'm saying so you'll appreciate this. I'm not saying you have to agree, but give me a chance here before you say, Ward, you're playing the race card. I am. Okay, I'm going to. But give it a chance. The hype of Tim Tebow, the popularity of Tim Tebow, and I would never say he wasn't sincere. The guy wore his religion on his sleeve, both sleeves, on his face, on his equipment. And so I'm not going to deny that he really believed in it and lived it. I'm not arguing that. But his popularity was partly to mostly because, yeah, he was super talented. Yes, he played the position in a different way, different kind of quarterback. But it's also largely because right-wing America loved him for wearing his faith and loved him because he was white. It does matter. Now, it doesn't mean that you're racist. It means that there is a relatability. People wanted to relate. It's the same thing with Caitlin Clark to middle America and the southern part of this country. They want to relate to that athlete. Okay? In Tebow's case, it was off the charts. Okay? Now, so agree or disagree with all that. I don't think that's an outrageous thing to say. That was part of the popularity. It was certainly a lot of the popularity when he was in the NFL. I remember having the fight countless times. And I kept telling people he's not good enough for the NFL. And a lot of you desperately wanted to believe it's because he wore his religion on his sleeve. And I said, trust me when I tell you this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. So that was a lot of the hype. And it was huge. It was almost to the point, I'll say this about the time of Tebow, which really pissed off a lot of people. And again, I don't think you gave this a fair chance. If I ran a team, because I compared, I remember the reaction. At the time, I'll do it again, compared employing Colin Kaepernick to employing Tim Tebow. I didn't need either one of them. If I was an owner, if I was a general manager, thanks but no thanks. They're not good enough for all the stuff. There. Man, did people go nuts when I made the comparison. I said, all I'm telling you is what comes with the popularity, the high-profile nature of Tebow at that time. He wasn't a good enough pro player. He wasn't. He had one pretty good season. Kaepernick had a few. But in the end, they just aren't good enough to justify all the stuff, all the popularity, all the news conferences, all the attention. I don't need that with the third-string quarterback. So, yeah, Tebow was a rock star in a number of ways. Arch Manning is a rock star already, I think in some different ways, but I do think the Manning part and the White part still fits. Let me explain. Of course, it's football royalty by name, okay? And so that's coming with it. There's nobody else has that. There's nobody else like it in the sport. There's been nobody else like it in the sport. I mean, it's generations of uber famous uncles and grandfather. And it's going to make him off the charts no matter what. He has talent. That's pretty obvious. There's a lot of talent there. But it's also a social media world now. So there's comparing the, athlete of today, a popular athlete of today is almost impossible to any other time just because of the amount of noise that can be made about them. But I do think there is also this compare. Now, I think it's fair to compare him to Tebow. I'm not saying that you're saying, I'm not, that he's as religious. I have no idea whatsoever. The fact that he does come from the Manning family, I do think middle America and the South will find him more relatable than other stars as well. And the reason is, one, the Mannings, okay? These are Southern rock stars. These are NASCAR drivers, but they also look the part. Peyton Manning is uber popular in middle America and the South, not just because he's a great player, I get it, but being high profile in endorsements goes beyond that, obviously. But he's popular because he looks like someone your granddad played football with in the 50s. He wears the sweater vest, he's got the short hair, and he did Buick commercials. That's something middle America and the South can relate to. His grandfather is famous. So they look like suburban white guys. And I think part of that's going to carry with no matter what. So there's all this stuff, this melting pot that makes he and Tebow, the comparison between he and Tebow, I think, fairly reasonable. Some of the same stuff that applies to Caitlin Clark. Middle America and Southern America desperately wants them. You want to relate to them. You think you can relate to them. So I think it's fair to say, I don't think it's an outrageous thing to compare him to Tim Tebow off the field. On the field, it may be completely different games. He's not done anything yet, so we'll see. Now, the criticism, though, that came from this guy, which it was very slight. It's hard to piece together the criticism, but this one I'm not sure I agree with. The high-profile nature of Arch Manning it's not his fault. Now, some of it he's embracing now, but I don't think anyone has mishandled his popularity. In fact, I think just the opposite. So this guy on this podcast goes on to say, quote, "It's interesting how they've talked about Arch. Because with as high profile as he is, and as high profile as he was as a recruit, I think it's very easy to tippy-toe with a person like that. You don't want to put him too far out in the spotlight. You don't want to have him be this larger-than-life story, but Texas really hasn't fought that." I don't agree with that, actually. Look, they can't. You can't. I mean, and I don't know if that's I don't know how serious that criticism is. I don't know if do you agree with that? Because I don't. I don't know how you can handle it any better. Well, what's Texas supposed to do? He comes from football royalty. He's famous. They can't tell him what to do or what not to do. He already has Red Bull as an endorsement. Could they tell him not to do that? No. I'll stand by this. To this point, the popularity, the level of exposure could not be handled any better. Any better. Now, the guy didn't go out to step out and be super high profile as a player. I thought it was managed as well. He's a bench warmer, and it was as managed as well as you could possibly manage it and try to lay low. I mean, I don't even think I think he did one interview at a bowl game or something. So I don't disagree. I don't agree at all that Texas and Arch Manning, didn't do what they could to temper the popularity. I think they did all they could. It was admirable. In a world of look at me some more, he and Texas did all they could to have that not be the case. Now, it's different already. Agreed. But I don't see where Texas could tell him no. And what I mean by it's different already is by the end of January, he had already done a sit-down interview with ESPN. Now, I guess, don't know for sure, but the fact that he was wearing a Red Bull hat, I'm going to guess that's the reason why. But Texas can't tell him no to that. I mean, to be honest, the Texas position has to be, we sure hope this kid can handle it. And I think he probably can. Grew up with it. But they can't micromanage him. They can't micromanage any player, even those without a name Manning. So he can go do Red Bull. He can do a commercial with his dad and his grandfather for Waymo. He can do all that stuff, and he's going to do all that stuff. They just have to hope that he stays between the lines and it all works out. So I don't think they deserve so far. I don't think they deserve any criticism because you can't give them any. It's not their business anymore. He's not. His popularity, his high-profile nature is nothing they can control. Nothing. He sat down to do that ESPN interview. When he put on a Red Bull hat, that was his time to say, here I am, I'm out, I'm now endorsing products. I'm not going to hide anymore. Okay. Yeah. He's going to make a lot of money doing it. So I don't think I don't buy that they should have handled this any differently. I don't. Even going forward. I mean, if they wanted to in a meeting say, man, could you do fewer interviews? I don't even know if you could say that. It seems to me the guy can handle it just fine. So they did all they could. He's the most talked about already player of the past 40 to 50 years. Yes, Tebow is a fair comparison in terms of popularity, recognition. I can't think of anyone else, even Johnny Manziel in his heyday. That's a fairly regional thing. Tebow was about as close to a national story as you could get. And I think Arch Manning is that on steroids. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. Just handle it. Manage it. Play well. On field, comparing him to Tim Tebow already is nuts. Nuts. Completely crazy. So it's going to be a steady drumbeat. It's going to be a drumbeat of hot takes about him. I mean, I agree that if Texas goes to Columbus, Ohio, beats Ohio State, I think they're going to be better than Ohio State at that time. He could be pretty good in that game, and it is going to be the story of the weekend. Unless something crazy happens in the NFL, it'll be the NFL doesn't even start. So it'll be the story for the next few days. And the hype will be ridiculous. And there'll already be talk about him being the first pick in the NFL draft. There's nothing anybody can do about that. Except him. All he can say is, I got another game next week. Texas can't micromanage him. They don't deserve that. But yeah, his popularity will dwarf that of Tim Tebow and will probably rival that of Caitlin Clark at the college level. The name, the look, and the school, yeah, they're fair comparisons. Sounds like a hot take. It sounds crazy, but I'm with the guy on that part. Off the field, those are fair comparisons.